Hello and welcome. My name is Richard. It is a great pleasure of mine to welcome you into this space I'm holding here by the candle light this evening. As I continue on the journey of a series of guidance and teaching that I've aimed at for light workers, those who have an affinity with the light and working with light and serving the evolution and healing as part of this journey of personal and planetary transformation that we as a species are at the forefront of. This is an 8-part teaching series, and tonight marks the penultimate chapter in that series. A teaching around courage. And continuing on from the last teaching, which we left with a question of how do I transform a scared life into a sacred life. A deep question to contemplate upon. Now, if you're new to this teaching, then I encourage you to look at the introductory video below, which sets out the journey of the 8-part series. Leading us on the journey home to wholeness. To our essence and true nature of being. And using light as a guiding force to accelerate that journey. So last time we reached a place where we turned inwards to the very root, the core wound that is carried by the child within, causing him or her to feel scared and to have his hand on the exit door. Doubting and questioning the decision to be here on this planet at this most auspicious time. Experience of great change. And to begin, I just want to be clear on a definition of what is a scared life and what is a sacred life. A point of clarification here. When we're living a scared life, we enter a field, a space, a vibration of experience in the world. And our system is reacting and responding to the stimuli around us in the environment. the external affects the internal. And we become like chameleons, showing different parts of ourselves depending on the situation. Feeling triggered by different energies in that space. Being one person in one situation and another in another. Trying to figure out how to be safe in each and every experience we have. Learning and developing these strategies of coping in the world. And then to shift from that to a sacred life is that we shift from the horizontal to the vertical. We learn to live from our center and our guidance and our trust in a higher force of grace that is guiding and shaping our lives. We know who we are and we live our lives accordingly. Acting out from that authentic inner sovereign authority and truth. Finding our safety in God rather than in circumstance. So that is the foundation that we are going to explore from tonight. And the question of how do I practically make this move? And the first key point to understand is that the answer lies within us. That we can make this shift by way of a shift in perspective. That it's our mindset of how we perceive our reality and our environment that shapes our experience of it. That we are not victims of circumstance. I'm reminded here of experience I had in my early 20s, where I embarked on a 4-month travelling solo journey. And my first port of call was New York City. And this was the year after the 9/11 terrorist attack. So entering as a young man into that energy field a year after, travelling in the middle of August, where the humidity was so high and it's quite an intense and overwhelming entry point to a 4-month journey that I was on. And I remember sitting in Bryant Park in the middle of Manhattan. And I was feeling that overwhelm and that scared. perspective. And I acted out from that space of feeling scared and trying to comfort myself by buying some fast food. Something I promised I wouldn't do the whole trip. And the first night, the second night, in fact, there I was, eating McDonald's. Not what I wanted. Feeling that shame. Feeling a victim of circumstance. But somehow I managed to shift myself out of that space and over to the Empire State Building. And I made that short journey to the summit. And by the time I reached that summit, my whole mindset had shifted to a place of immense awe and gratitude, knowing that I was in this city for the first time and may never be here again. Looking out over the darkness, because it was evening time by then, and all the lights of the city. And I felt empowered. And I knew on that trip that I was going to be okay. If I could shift myself and parent myself out of that feeling sorry state. That was a great teaching for me that I carried forward through my 20s. That capacity to parent myself as a young adult, to parent my inner child through difficult experiences. And in a sense, that was a shift from a scared life to a sacred life in that moment. Because gratitude is the vibration of sacredness. It's the field of God. But now I'm in my 40s. And I'm asking myself a deeper question. How can I hold my seat in Bryant Park, figuratively, and shift my perspective without actually needing to move into a different environment? Because I am living a life right now where I don't have a lot of external freedom by choice. Having a young family to support and care for, I've chosen to give up those freedoms. And at times I feel overwhelmed by the weight of that responsibility. And the energy, intensity of family life. And it's the question of how do I practically move myself and shift my perspective from the ground floor to the penthouse view, a more expanded perspective. when it's easy to focus very narrowly on what is staring me in the face in the daily demands of family life. It's a different journey. And I introduced this teaching by talking about courage. And that is the path of courage. Because it's easy to find the sacredness by going searching for it in heightened experiences, pleasant states, using different tools and techniques to move my state of being. But how do I cultivate that? How do I embody that in a grounded, practical way in a human life? Now, it was 6 months ago actually that I was preparing this talk. Because I wanted to tie it in with the Easter festival. Because that archetypal story of Jesus moving from the cross and transforming this tragedy into a holy, sacred experience. I felt it resonated with this teaching. But in truth, I was so deeply in a scared space in that time that the teaching I created had no value in the transmission. It is one thing to be a student of the teaching I am giving, but I must be at least pointing myself in the right direction. And so for the last 6 months I have been contemplating this more deeply, doing a lot of soul searching around this. I'm wondering when I would be ready to actually do this teaching again. And I feel it has evolved, and I have evolved through that contemplation. To feel comfortable to sit here tonight and to speak to this. If you've listened to my earlier teachings, you will know I was going through a period of unemployment early this year. And I was sinking deep into depression around that. Trying to find a way to cope with life. But I feel in a stronger space now than then. And I have received the grace of God to support me And yet the practical challenge of embodying a sacred life still rumbles on. Because I feel great resistance to moving in that direction. And I'm going to come on to that in due course in this teaching as to why I feel there is that resistance. To put a lifetime of spiritual training into practice in day-to-day life. Why it takes great courage to walk that road, rather than keeping the spiritual and the human separate and distinct. Now, the way I wish to talk about this tonight draws on an earlier metaphor that I presented in, I'm not sure if it was the third or the fourth teaching. And I talked about the three aspects of the self. The part of me that is asleep, the part of me that is waking up, and the part of me that is already awake. And there is a fourth part as well. The part of me that chooses to work with light and to accelerate my evolution. And I presented an image of these aspects of the self where the sleeping part of me is a rocky coastline, and the part of me that is already awake is the water of the ocean, and the part of me that is waking up is the boat that's trying to chart its course down the coastline. And then the final part is the lighthouse keeper, the one who has built his lighthouse and who is shining light onto that coastline for a very special purpose. And if we recall, I defined a light worker or a lighthouse as like yeast in a loaf of bread. It's designed to speed up the process, accelerate growth and evolution. And when we say yes to that, we are setting in motion a chain of events. And I want to turn the focus to the boat, the part of me that is waking up, as it relates to my teaching tonight. So imagine there's no light on that coastline. It's pitch black, like tonight. If there was no candlelight, I'd be sitting here in the dark. So I'm on my boat and I'm feeling a lot of fear around the rocks. I fear the sleeping world. And I project that fear onto the world around me. I see the broken systems. I see the violence. I see the manipulation, the unkindness of humanity, the unconsciousness of the so-called matrix. And in the dark, I'm in a state of fear in relationship to that. But not realizing that my deepest fear is the sleeping part inside of me, which I am saying is that inner child. What the inner child wants is to stay asleep, wants routine, permanency. The inner child has a deep dislike of change and growth. It just wants to feel safe. And so all our fears of the world around us are really all that within us. We all have that sleeping part of us that doesn't want to change, that wants geological time to extend on for infinity. But then the light shines from the lighthouse, and the rocky coastline can be seen. And the part of me that is waking up begins to relax. The nervous system becomes regulated. And the boat starts to move. And it starts to move out into deeper waters, away from the coastline that it can see. In truth, it is trying to turn towards and merge with the deeper waters of the ocean, remembering that the water is the part of us that is already awake, the eternal, the pure, the love, the essence of our being. And the boat goes on a journey, believing that the light is helping it to support that journey, a journey into peak experiences. We enthusiastically engage with our spiritual practices or our artistic practices, chasing the next high, delving into great teachings. We have a love of gathering information and transmissions of energy. And the search is on for fulfillment. And that is part of the journey. But there comes a moment in time where we discover that the more we move away from the coastline, the light begins to elude us. It gets darker. We become lost in our experiences of bliss, of joy, of pleasure. Whatever our trip is, whatever tool we use to get into a heightened state, it begins to lead us more into the dark. And then we discover that the lighthouse has this magnetic pull. When it's trying to pull us back to the coastline, back to the embodied human self, back into the world. And that is a very confusing time, because we have these fantasies of building a new earth, a new world. Manifesting great abundance to support that. Quitting our jobs and becoming artists, nature lovers. It's all beautiful. But then we get pulled back. And we feel like we're losing touch with the light. Going more back into ego. And I've heard a lot of teachers speaking lately around this theme of confusion. And this is where the resistance comes in. Because we're being pulled back into an ordinary life. Back towards the coastline, to the sleeping part of us. And it's not where we want to go. But it is as if the lighthouse is calling us to be courageous and daring us, asking us, how close can you get back to the shore in your boat? The light I am shining is not to help you keep your distance from the coastline. It's calling you back into proximity with it. And why is that, we ask? Now, where the waters and the rocks meet is where the transformation happens. That is the alchemy. That is true evolution. That is where the acceleration happens. Not out in the deeper waters. Not on great trips. Right there. Right in that spot. And as the water works on the rocks, this is all done by an act of grace. It's all up to God, how that goes. It's not our business to wake up the sleeping part of us and a sleeping world. It's all up to grace. But the boat has a part to play in the script. which is very interesting, I feel, to reflect upon. Because the boat is being called to get right into those choppy waters where the shaping and transformation is happening in its own perfect timing. And we're being encouraged to drop down our anchor, to hold our feet onto this ground. To be anchored to the sacred channel in trust and confidence that we are in the right place at the right time. We're not being swayed around by the choppy waters, the turbulence. Now for me, that turning back to the coastline was to choose a life that felt the most difficult and challenging for me, which was a family life. That's not natural to me. In my wildest dreams, I could come up with 1,000 ideas for my life, and that would not be part of it. Great trips I would like to go on into the deeper waters, and yet here I am, pulled into a life that I know as a Lightworker is the most important and giving me the greatest growth and service to humanity. And it will look different for you. That calling that doesn't feel sensible or right necessarily to certain parts of you. Going out of the comfort zone and engaging and dropping the anchor. And it seems that that part of me that is waking up, the role in the script it has is to be the witnessing presence of the transformational process. To get a front row seat. To bear testimony. To hold space for that child to wake up. Not forcing. And I talked last time of the art of being a champion. To champion the child. To encourage the child to embrace a life of expansion beyond its web of safety. And championing has a non-interfering quality to it. And that is the energy and purpose for the part of me that is waking up. That is its role in the script. And the more that I honor that choice to turn my boat around and to realize it is my choice, and to realize that the moment I chose to welcome the lighthouse into my life and to be a lighthouse keeper was a choice to be magnetized back to the coastline and to bear witness. And yet there is still that resistance to putting my anchor down, and I am still working through that as part of my journey. How do I use 20 years of spiritual training to support me in this witnessing role? When every fibre of that part of me wants to turn its back on the sleeping world, rather than trying to discover the sacred life that is there to be discovered. When one turns towards it and penetrates right through it, because that is oh so more powerful and stronger. It's so much stronger to sit in Bryant Park, to breathe and feel and champion the child, than to get off my seat and go and climb the Empire State Building. Now that is not to say that sometimes we don't have to move. Sometimes we do. And sometimes that is the best choice. And in that moment for me as a young man, that was the best choice. But I don't want to rely on that. I want to feel so centered, so attuned, that I respond rather than react to my environment. And that is the teaching I want to give tonight. And next time I want to look a little more at this field of grace, the role that grace plays, and what the vision of a new human looks like once we move through this evolutionary time of great change, transformation, what lies beyond. Thank you for your presence and your time. And let us take a deep breath together, allowing this transmission to come through with the intention that it may be of the benefit to all of humanity in leading us home. May we love and care for the child within us and be there with him or her always, without shame, and without turning our back in any shape or form. Thank you, beloved. Thank you for your time. Blessed be.